I'm Father Terence Curley, and once again, I'd like to talk about real advances that have happened in our understanding about grief. And these advances are important for all of us because one time or another in our lives, we do lose so many things, so many people, and even our own image of ourselves. But the new approaches, I think, are much more helpful and much more healing than anything we've had to date. As I mentioned so many times to my students when I teach at the seminary, the importance of research and what the research has given us. And some of the major researches that have occurred have been with the changing lives of older citizens. That was a whole research paper which was done with George Bonanno and a few others. And it's so important because it said that older people don't really grieve the way they thought they did, because in that research they looked at what were things like before and what are they like after and what are they like during. And they found out that people grieve differently than they thought. And so too, as I know from the 1996 study at Mass General, we found out new things. And what we're finding out with the new science and new psychology of loss is that that's affecting the way we console one another. That's affecting the way we bring healing to others. Because what's really happening is there's a new landscape for understanding of grief ministry, and a new landscape for the way we grieve and how we find hope, and how we realize that it's not all a psychology that says you have to let go. It's much more than that. It's psychology that says, yes, you have to engage and you have to remember. And that's what really makes the difference. In my work, Challenging the Landscape of Loss, I talk about different case examples and pastoral examples that I've had throughout the years. One example I have that I've always found very meaningful and very helpful was a woman that I knew for many years when I was first a priest called me up one day, and she was in senior housing. And she said that, Father, I'd like to have you come by for supper. I think she's going to give me chicken pot pie. That's always the favorite in elderly housing. So anyway, I said, oh yeah, that's great. I'd love to come over. She said, but I want you to get there a little bit early. And I said, all right, if you want, I'll get there early. So I came in and I was talking with her. And she said, there's something that's bothering me. And I said, what's that? She talked about her son Bobby. And she said that what I'm wondering about is if he's really grieving correctly. And I said, well, what's going on? And she said, well, he cuts the lawn for all the elderly in the area. He shovels their snow. He rakes the leaves. He does all kinds of things all the time. So when I confronted him about it, I said, you know, what are you doing with your grief? What's really happening in your life? And he said, you don't seem to understand, Ma. If I don't keep on going and keep on doing things, I can't keep on going. That was his way of coping. And the reason he was doing it was because he had lost his daughter in a terrible accident. She slipped and slid on the dry ice of driving her car, and she was killed. And she was a beautiful young woman, and I remember the funeral and the wake, and it was devastating. But yet, he was doing these things. I think he was remembering her and realizing that he still had very much a relationship with her. Now, what would I have done years ago if someone called me in that instance? I would have said, well, maybe there's some avoidance and denial here, and maybe they're not really facing it. But I think he was. He was doing, everything else was fine. This was his way of finding meaning, and he was doing something very important. And I'm sure he was doing it motivated by the right things. And so I said to her, I said, well, he's fine. Just help him. Support him. If he wants to help people, and that's his way of finding meaning and coping, then there's nothing wrong with him. But before, you know, it would have been, oh, we have to sit down, he maybe needs a lot of extensive counseling. And then, in that extensive counseling, he'd recall all these things, and there won't be anything pathological going on. Well, there's nothing pathological going on. And it was so quick to label that. And that's how, unfortunately, we police people, and we don't have the compassion and the understanding that we should have for them. This year, on December the 8th, on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, the Holy Father, Pope Francis, wrote a wonderful document, and it's on the Year of Mercy. I know his new encyclical is out, and everyone's talking about that. But we're going to be talking a lot about the Year of Mercy too, and that will be with the new encyclical. But one of the overarching features of Pope Francis's writing is compassion. He cares for those who are poor, and he cares for those who are poor in many ways. They're poor in their faith. They're poor in not realizing the resources that they have. So this document that he wrote outlines the need for compassionate care for others. And that's in this statement that'll start with the Holy Year of December the 8th. And we have different holy years. We have holy years for new evangelization and other topics. But I think this holy year with mercy and compassion certainly is essential for us, that we put ourselves in the other person's position, and that we are a loving listener, that we're not judgmental or trying to fit somebody into something that isn't really spiritual, but listening to what their story is. And in listening to their story, we say, how am I helping them to reconstruct a new worldview, a new way of thinking about things? Now, very often we police people, and another sociologist that I like to go to a lot in England is Tony. Anyway, what he talks about, I'm trying to think of his name. All right, well, Tony, that'll come to me towards the end of the talk. But anyway, the sociologist talks about the importance of policing in cultures. We do that. And we do that by telling somebody, you have to go for counseling, you have to do this, or you have to do that. And he gives an example from Brazil, all right, a Brazilian mother. And what they do there, and it's kind of a sad story, how they police this woman who had lost her child. And he says it's a grave sin for the mother to cry for the first 60 days after the baby's death, because their mother's tears will make the road from earth to heaven slippery, and he will lose his footing and fall. Tony Walter. So that's what Tony Walter says. He's a well-known sociologist in England, and I use him a lot in talking about the new approaches and the new sociology and the new ways of understanding things. What we're the product of, that's from Brazil, what we're the product of is really the Euro-American model. And that model hasn't served us well, because it's based on the idea of severing and not the idea of finding meaning and moving on. So what the task in front of us, if I use the word task in this instance, I don't like to use it, because the word task means there's a lot of work you have to do, and there's a guarantee that once you do this task, which is based in many ways in Freudian and neo-Freudian models, once you do this task, everything will be all right. Well, we know it's not going to be all right, and we know there's no task like that. There's no quick fix, nor should there be. It's interwoven, grief is interwoven with the tapestry of our entire lives. So we're going to continually do that. So we have to resist and create a new landscape, where we have to deconstruct and let go of those words that we use so very often, such as closure or letting go, and all of the things that people tell us. But they're only telling us that because they think they're helping. But in reality, it's not helping. So we're trying to resist a one-size-fits-all model. And what we're doing is we're rewriting the script by telling our story. It's a storied approach, not a neat little theory that follows A, B, and C. We don't live that way. None of us do. And as I said at the very beginning, grief is idiosyncratic. You know, we bring with it all of our memories, our dreams, our reflections, the reality of our experiences of a loved one's presence, or the love that we want to have continue. And that's so much in keeping with what we believe in as a church. We believe, and we hear so very often in our funeral liturgies, the vigil and the liturgies all surrounding the death of a Christian, we hear that life isn't taken away, life is changed. A great transformation. And in that transformation, the great mystery of what God does to us, we who are left behind and hoping for the kingdom have to rediscover and refashion our own lives and discover deeper meaning, which we can, and it will be given to us.